Hey guys, my name is Steven, and today I'm going to walk you through a project I created to demonstrate how to connect to MySQL using Python. So we're going to loop through some Excel files, we're going to extract some data using Pandas, and then we're going to upload that data to a table in our MySQL database. So I recently ran into a problem where I needed to extract some data from some strangely formatted Excel files. The rows and columns were not clean. So my first instinct was to use a Python script, and it turned out to be a quick and efficient solution. So let's say you have some error logs like this for some employee data, and we're only interested in the ID column and the error message column. And as you can see, the data doesn't start until row 6. So we need the ID, we need the error message, and we also need the date that the error occurred. So we're going to get that from the file name. So I went ahead and set up a database. So we're going to import these 3 columns, FullID, error message, and the file name. And these other columns we're just going to use the data that we pulled in. We're going to modify it a little bit, and we're going to set the values for these other columns. So all we need to worry about right now is the ID, the error message, and the file name. So let's take a look at our Python script. So we're using OS to connect to our files. We're using the MySQL library to connect to our database. And we're using Pandas to pull our Excel files into a data frame that we can then loop through and insert data into our database. So path, this is where our files are located. We're using the os.listdir method like I talked about in my last video. We're going to get all these files into a list, and then we can iterate through that list. So this is where we set up the connection to our MySQL database. You need the host or your IP address, you need your username and password, and then you need to specify which database you're going to connect to. So we're going to connect to Schema 1. Next thing we need to do is set up mycursor using the cursor method. This is what we'll use to execute SQL statements to our database. So we just need to set up this variable here. And now we have our SQL statements. So the first statement is just inserting our 3 values into the database. We're getting the full ID, the error message, and the file name. And right now we just have SQL placeholders here. And we're going to get these values once we start looping through the rows in our data. The next SQL statements are just getting our other columns, which are just modified versions of the 3 values that we're pulling in up here. So for this one, for example, we're getting rid of the P and the underscore for the ID, and we're just getting the numerical ID here. Dayfor, we're pulling our date from the file name, which is in the year, month, day format. And then once we have that, then we can actually get a real date value here. And this last SQL statement is just truncating the table. We're going to run this before we do anything else, just to make sure that table is empty so we don't have any duplicates. So here's where we start looping through our files. So for file and list of files, if the file is an Excel file, then we will set the file path by adding the folder path to the file name. So now we have our full file path. Now what we want to do is set up a data frame, and data frames are really great tools. You can think of it kind of like a spreadsheet in Python, and all we need to do here is use the read Excel method. We're going to pull in this file path, and we're going to set that equal to a data frame. So let's see what this looks like if I print this out. and I have one of my Excel files open, so let's close this. Okay, so we can see our data frames here. We can see our columns. The data is a little bit messy, but that's okay. We can work with this. So the name of our file, batcherrorlogs1, this will be column 1 with our IDs, and column 2 unnamed, this will be our error messages that correspond to those IDs over here. So let's start looping through this data frame. I'm going to uncomment this. So for I in range, length of data frame, so we're going to get the number of rows that we have in the data frame. So it doesn't matter if one file has more rows than the other file, because we're going to iterate through the entire data frame. So for each row in the data frame, let's go ahead and print, and we're going to use the location method here for the data frame. This specifies our row, so this will be the row that we're iterating on, and then we're going to select our column, and that first column is called batch error logs. So let's go ahead and save this. Let's run it and see what it looks like. And I have another print statement, so let's comment that out. Okay, so we're just getting that first column, but we don't need any of these NaN rows or this ID header column. So let's create an if statement that only selects rows that start with a P, so we know that they're real IDs. So if it starts with a P, then we set up our values here. We need the batch error logs column, we need this unnamed 2 column, and we need the file name that we're iterating for up here. So let's print these values, see what this looks like. Okay, so we have our 3 values that we need for each row in the data frame. We have our ID, we have our error message, and we have the file name, and we can use that file name to get our date. So we have the right values. All that's left to do is execute our SQL statement up at the top. So we're going to insert these values into our database. Then we're going to run these other SQL statements to update these other columns that we have in our table. So let's uncomment this stuff out here. And if you remember, my table is empty. This is my table in MySQL. And let's run this script and see what happens. So looked like it worked. Let's check my table. And there we go. So if you check my database, now we have all 6 of these columns pulled in. We have the full ID. We have the ID, which is just the numerical ID. We have our error message. We have our file name. We have this Dayfor value that we extracted from the file name, and then we have the date that the error occurred. So I hope that helps you guys. You know, it's really useful to be able to just pull in some Excel files, manipulate those Excel files using a data frame, and then updating that data into a database.
So let me know if you guys have any questions. And yeah, leave a like and comment if this helps you. Thanks, guys.